Hey gang, welcome back. Today we have a very special guest, one I've been looking forward to for quite a long time. It is Dale Meyer. Dale Meyer is a friend of mine, a colleague, brother pastor, and somewhat of a mentor. I met Dale back in 1988 when we were both in the St. Louis area. And we had this conversation to kind of reintroduce you, if you've never met Dale before, an introduction to Dale. He is a former president of the Concordia Seminary that I went to in St. Louis. He is a former teacher from there. I believe he still has one or two classes. And he's also the former speaker of the Lutheran Hour, which is the longest running religious program on the radio. It's actually heard worldwide, but here in the United States, it started in, it's got it started in the 1920s. And Dale did a wonderful job as Speaker of the Lutheran Hour. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Due to a technical glitch, we could not get the first part of the conversation recorded. But it was really just an introduction, me welcoming him in. You're not really missing anything. We're going to pick up our conversation where he tells us that he is from the Southside of Chicago and how he grew up, and then we're off to the races. I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation. Stay tuned. At the end, I'll tell you more about how you can get in touch with St. Matthew, who produces this podcast, St. Matthew Lutheran in Hawthorne Woods, where I am one of the pastors. So let's get at it on this episode of the Reflection Podcast.
In Chicago Heights, and I had just a wonderful middle class childhood. My dad was a milkman. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. We went to church every Sunday. I had the blessing of a Lutheran grade school, and I always wanted to be a minister. Probably the most formative things in my life came from those years. And I have to tell the viewers, we're in my man cave, all right? So if you look carefully behind me, you see tools. Now, I've got my books and Bibles and all that stuff around here too. But basically, because of the way I was raised, I think of myself as a blue collar guy. I'm not a fancy pastor who sits in his ivory tower and comes up with ideas that the lay people should do while I'm not out there with the people. So yeah, I always wanted to be a pastor, and I had a strange career as far as that goes. But yeah, I'm a normal guy.
So you're not a pastor's kid like a lot of the pastors that I know. Kind of like my own story too. Nobody in my family went into the ministry, except I had an uncle who was a Catholic priest for a time, but gave it up to get married. So that's interesting.
We had some in the family, and have had in every generation, especially on my mom's side, the Bauer family. But no. And in fact, the truth is, if I hadn't become a pastor, I would have been happy delivering milk.
Okay.
Now, that would have been a dumb decision, because milk is it's a bad business to be into.
Oh.
It's tank. But so the ministry is fine.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you did go into the ministry, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So when did you really know you wanted to be a pastor, and then what did you do next?
As a little boy, I always wanted to do it. I don't know why. Maybe because there were some in the family. Maybe we went to church and I admired the pastor we had at the time. I really don't know. I'd like to know in hindsight that it was the work of God and the Holy Spirit, but I'll leave that to him to tell me.
Well, it must be. It must have been, right? Because I'm sure you were influenced by the pastor you saw every week up there, and as you mentioned, in your family as well. But it is interesting how sometimes right out of the blue, we don't know why we're called to do these things, and yet God has a way of doing that. Where did you end up going to school to be a pastor?
Well, I might first say that knowing that I wanted to be a pastor from the early grades on meant that my antennae were up for certain things. So I started taking religious stuff in. How does a pastor act in a situation like this as a little kid? And that's in hindsight has been a benefit. The answer to the question is uh, I went to junior college at Concordia, Milwaukee,
Mhm.
now at Mequon,
Yep.
and then Concordia Senior College in Fort Wayne, which is now the campus of our Springfield Seminary, and then the St. Louis Seminary. Uh, so every one of the schools that I've gone to has either closed or gone through a radical change, and there might be a cause and effect to that too. I don't know.
No, I don't think so. But that we did. Then we have walked the same grounds through for both of us. I also went. I went to Mequon, second year on that campus after Concordia Milwaukee moved out of the city, and then I also went to St. Louis for seminary as well. What I guess what the question I'm trying to dig down on is the feeling that you had. This is exactly what I want to do. Was there a moment that yeah, now I realize yeah, this is exactly what God is calling me to do? Is it that you had a joy of getting up in front of people and preaching, or was it other aspects of pastoral ministry?
I was always terrified of giving class reports.
Okay.
And so the idea of preaching sermons was just something I figured, well, this is what you do. You have to do it. So I eventually got into it. You don't want me to give a class report because it'll go on forever and ever. The best answer I can give is when I got to my first church in Southern Illinois, there's a dual parish, and I was terrified because I knew I could do the academics, but you can take a fool and ordain him, and you've got an ordained fool. Can I actually be a pastor? And so the first year, 2 years, whatever, what I was doing was imitating the pastor models that I had in my life, and from Chicago Heights, St. Paul, Chicago Heights. I said, what would Pastor Leyenbauer do in a situation like this? And then that's what I would do. The time came, and I don't remember a year, 2 years in, all of a sudden it dawned on me, no, I am a pastor. I'm not doing the role anymore. I actually am a pastor. Sleeping, eating, drinking, playing, you name it. That's who I am. And that was a wonderful feeling. I mean, I screwed up a lot of situations. I made it tough. We all do that, but I was doing it as a pastor then. So that's the answer. I wanted to be a pastor in school, but I don't think I became one until I was actually functioning in the congregation. Somebody said, and I picked this up during my time at the seminary, my last stint at the seminary. Seminary prepares people to be pastors. The congregation makes a man a pastor.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I was prepared, but then when I got into the parish, I kind of had some not so kind thoughts for the preparation because I felt it was like I have no idea what I'm doing, and so I'm going to learn by doing. I mean, I can craft a sermon. That's great. I can read a Bible in Greek and well, somewhat Hebrew, but the day to day ins and outs of being a pastor. Now you've got lots of experience in that. You started out in Southern Illinois. When did you end up in Central Illinois?
Uh, Never.
Well, Collinsville is what I mean, though.
Well,
That's what I mean by Central Illinois. I'm from Chicago, so anything
everything
south of
south
me
of
is
everything south of Kankakee is whatever it
gotcha.
is. So I was in Venety and New Memphis, a dual parish, and that's like 50 miles from St. Louis.
Okay,
And then when I went to the seminary the first time, we moved to Collinsville. Collinsville is 12 miles from St. Louis.
right.
So Missouri Synod wise, I'm in the Southern Illinois district. Chicagoan wise, I'm in Kentucky.
Yeah, you're in the South.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, but it's what I'm trying to drill down here on is, or get us to, is your time at Collinsville. You started a Bible study
Mhm.
at there, and then it was broadcast, and that's where you and I first crossed paths. They broadcasted your Bible study on the radio in St. Louis, being only so many miles away. It was by a telephone line, if I remember right.
Well, no, actually, we recorded it the week before,
Okay.
and then they brought it in. And Ed, that made for some hilarious moments because I like to take groups on little local tours. So I think one time we were going to go to Grant's Farm, and in the Bible class being recorded, one of the participants said, "Next week when we go to Grant's Farm, what time are we leaving?" So we had to fake that, but we got away with it. But yeah, that was a fun time. It was a fun time. I got a letter once. The lady said all you do is make jokes, but by the end of the class, she said we've actually learned something.
Well, and I would be back at the radio station making sure that that went on the air. So that's where it's like I know this guy, but I only know him by his voice. We never actually met face to face at that point. Was that your first foray into radio, so to speak?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
and so that led to what was next after Collinsville.
Let's see. I went from that dual parish to the seminary to teach for 3 years, and my wife said, "You're too young to be doing this. These are all old guys, and you should actually be out in the ministry." And I thank Diane for that. It was good advice. So Collinsville had a vacancy. The pastor had passed away suddenly, and they called me to this church. So that's when the Bible class started, and I'm not sure how exactly I got to the Lutheran hour. Well, I mean, somebody found me, and it's been media ever since. But it's been a
Right.
great learning experience. Uh,
Yeah, the Lutheran Hour. You followed. Was it Ozzy Hoffman and had retired?
the great Oswald
Yes,
Hoffman. He's, I, I mean, I have high respect for him,
absolutely.
and he was one of my models. And so when we both traveled a lot, so whenever I would come into the office and he would happen to be in the office, I would go pay my respects, and it was always
Absolutely.
her, Dr. Hoffman, dot dot dot. So, but I did get to feel a little more comfortable with him, and I came in one day and I said, "Sir, I was just out in the field, and they're talking about you out there." "Oh, what are they saying?" I said, "They're saying that Ozzy Hoffman, he's no Dale Meyer."
Oh,
Just like you, he leaned back and he roared. And that was getting back to the earlier question. That was another time I got into that. I said, I can't do this job. I'm not the speaker. Eventually, I got the feeling, yeah, okay, I am the speaker. So I've always been slow to settle into a new job.
so during your time at Lutheran Hour, they decided they were going to go back into television. They had done This Is the Life back in I think in the 50s. Um, Take us through that a little bit because on Main Street with Dale Meyer was a big deal, at least from my perspective. That was something the Missouri Synod had done through the Lutheran Layman's League and Lutheran Hour. That was somewhat new for a lot of people.
Yeah, the goal at the Lutheran Hour, and I assume that is still the case, is simply to make connections with people and to connect them to a congregation, not necessarily to convert them, although that does happen. And around the world, they've got, I think, 35 offices. The stories are amazing. The conversions happen. But in this unique American setting where everybody thinks they're Christian or used to, we wanted to connect them with a church. And so the motto of the Lutheran Hour had been bringing Christ to the nations. And this emphasis on making connections led to Jerry Perschbacher, the editor of the Layman, suggesting, how about and the nations to the church? Christ to the nations, the nations to the church. So that on Main Street was intended simply to, if you're interested in this, just give us a call. We've got some literature, and if you like, we can connect you with somebody that you can talk with about this. And if you don't, that's fine too. So that was a gentler way to present the message, to make a connection. And I think now, 30 years later, whatever it is, more than ever, America doesn't want Bible thumpers. America wants to know this guy's a genuine person. This woman is a genuine person. He's a friend. A friend of mine, Richard Habecker, he was the president of the American Bible Society. He said, don't tell me what a friend I have in Jesus until I see what a friend I have in you. And that's what On Main Street was intended to be. We did 300 shows, so it was a great. All of this, Ed, taught me, corrected me time and time again. So it was all a formative experience. So for a little kid who wanted to become a pastor, I'd never imagined I'd be having these experiences.
Yeah.
And I'll probably be judged more severely on the last day than most people.
Thankfully, that God only looks at Christ when he sees us. So we have that going for us. So that's great. So after Lutheran Hour, kind of bringing you up to almost to present day, you did your stint as speaker on the Lutheran Hour and on Main Street. And then Concordia Seminary came knocking again, didn't they?
Yeah. And that was something. I loved the Lutheran Hour, but I was of the opinion that we can get better preachers in the field. And well, you know how hard it is to take a call. It's an awful thing, but I did it, and I was expecting to teach homiletics, and then my friend John Johnson sabotaged me and went to River Forest, Chicago now,
right?
And they picked me, and again, that was another job I wasn't prepared for, and the guy, we use consultants all the time, because basically I didn't know squat, and we needed somebody to come in and say, now, I've experienced this is how it goes. So a consultant said, it's going to take you 4 years to figure this job out. And sure shooting it did. So as I said before, I'm a slow learner.
So what is it that you experienced, and this can be at any stop along the way, that I expected this, but I got this. What are some of the things that you really didn't have any idea this was going to happen as either a pastor or a radio speaker or as a president of a seminary?
My wife and I talk about this, and you see it in hindsight. So I look back at the congregations I've served. I've 12 years in as a parish pastor, or I should say 12 years as a real pastor like you, doing that. And you look back, and there were dynamics going on that you really didn't realize when you came in. They surfaced and you dealt with them. And then Diane and I would say, looking back, that was a lot harder than we realized when we were going through it. The Lutheran Hour didn't have that so much. That there's a learning curve. How do you talk to millions of people without seeing them? But then the seminary, there was stuff going on there, administrative, financial, that I was totally a babe in the woods about. But you just get in, and as you know so well, this is the cross. You say, well, I didn't sign up for this. And Jesus says, I don't care what you thought you signed up for. You're there. You deal with it. The seminary had a financial issue when I started, and $28 million in debt. And I can remember, I can show you the place this is like 2008, 2009, when the Great Recession was happening. I can show you exactly where I had the thought I'd be better off dead than doing this. And it wasn't suicidal. It was not in the least. But then the next thought I had is, well, sucker, you're the guy that is supposed to be here and try and tackle this. And if you do, fine. And if you don't, okay. So, yeah, and I'm glad in a lot of ways for my naivete, because I would go into situations not realizing this ain't good.
I get it. It's one of those, you're too dumb to know that you're in big trouble, or you can't do it, but
Exactly.
So the reason I asked that question is because I think a lot of people don't realize just what goes into being the things that we do as God has called us to do them. And we might have this idealistic view of being a pastor or being a teacher or being a computer programmer or whatever it is. And there's actually a whole lot of other things that are out there around us that God obviously knows. And that's why he called you to be there. He knew that this was going on, and he had you in mind to deal with it. And it's the funny thing about God is that he often doesn't confer with us first, because I'm sure we would say, no way, I'm not doing that. But he just says, yep, it's either sink or swim, and don't worry, I can walk on water, so you got it made. Once we can get past that, I think that everybody is better served with that.
If I may, that triggers two thoughts in my mind. One is I didn't realize it all these years, but it's clear to me in retirement I love working. Maybe that's the blue collar tools behind me. I love working. I'm not a workaholic, but I love working, and retirement's been an adjustment because you don't have those problems out there to engage. Not that we solve them all the time, but just to be engaged, even if we lose. So I love working. The other thing, and this struck me when I was pastor at Holy Cross here in Collinsville, downstate. I can't keep up with all of this. We had almost 1,000 per week in worship at that time. Now this is going back 30, 40 years. And we had a staff, and I can't keep up with all of this. And then of course you've always got a little controversy popping up, an alligator about the kitchen carpet or whatever, or the sacrament of the Ladies' Aid kitchen, where we have to protect that sacrament more than the real one. So there's always, but it totally emptied me. It got me to the spot where I'm empty, and I need to be saved, not only work wise, but totally saved, because I can't present my merits or my works to Christ. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, parish ministry, if you're doing your work, and if you've got more than 10 people, pushes down at you.
Yes.
And you're like the shock absorber. You're taking all this, and from every which direction. So Matilda is upset about this, and Fred is upset about that. They don't know that they're both coming at you, the shock absorber, and you have to take it and reply with calm. One of the greatest lessons I learned, mottos I learned, came from Denny Golden, who was president of Fonpon. And he said, accept chaos, give back calm, provide hope. But the people don't know that it's eating you up in between.
Yeah, I get that too. It's an exhausting thing. Most people, all they see is of a pastor, for the most part, is, well, he's up there in the pulpit or up in the front, or he's behind the podium in Bible class. And then what does he do for the rest of the week? And there's all kinds of different things that I think it serves the church well if the people know what it is that we do, and we're not complaining about it. We're not trying to toot our own horn. It's just like, but it is our. And the longer you're in a church, it gets even harder. I'm finding this out too as a pastor, being here for over 10 years now. I know the people very well. They're family. And can you imagine in your own family how many funerals you go to for your family members? It's not that many. Parents most likely. God forbid it would be a child. That's very, very difficult, or grandparents. But as a pastor, you're doing 15, 20, 30 of those a year. And that's what I found. And that's what I found the most exhausting part is not that I'm doing the funerals. It's just, it's so sad that I don't have this person to talk to anymore. It was somebody that was a family member, and they're not here anymore. But thankfully, the gospel that I get to share with them also speaks to me. I feel that as well. The comfort of the resurrection. That's what gets me through every day
Well,
as a pastor.
you're making me do something I shouldn't do, is ask you the question.
Sure.
So how do you, as a busy pastor of a large church, tend to your own spiritual life in an honest way,
Sure.
not whatever it is? Because I mean, we know statistically pastors burn out, and a lot of time it's their devotional life, their gospel life that has been neglected.
I learned that early on. In fact, I learned it on my vicarage. When I went out on vicarage after 2 years of classes, going out on vicarage and then coming back for the last year of classes at the seminary, there were two pastors. One was the supervisor, but there were two pastors on staff, and they would sit me down every week and talk to me and say, how you doing? They would check in with me, not just for my class, to make sure I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, but how am I doing personally? How am I doing? Because I was married, still am, but I was married on my vicarage. I didn't go out on vicarage single. And they were very deliberate. All right, this is your day off. You do not, that is sacrosanct. We know not to call you unless it's an absolute emergency. And I've carried that into my ministry. It's like I have a day off a week, and I guard that very, very protective. There's the occasional, yes, we'll have to have a funeral that day, but then I'll take another day. I'll go into the office and then I'll take another day. And then I am very, very deliberate in my day off and my vacation time and spending time with my family. Very, very important. I've seen that with other pastors in that they would neglect the family. I've got to be at a meeting, 5 days a week. I'm never around for bedtime when the kids were young. And I learned that early on. No. This meeting, may start at 7, but I'm out of here at 8 o'clock because it's bedtime at my house at 9 o'clock, and I want to be there to put the kids to bed with my wife. And so very, very important. I was deliberate in that early on, and I learned that in my vicarage
Well,
from the two pastors.
I appreciate that. I'm not sure that I was that good with boundaries in Collinsville. I mean, and one of the things is if we can compensate for a busy day with an easier day and some family time the next one, but I think you figured it out more quickly than I did.
I think that's how I certainly give all credit and glory to God, but I'll be a pastor 30 years this June, and that's the only reason I'm still at it 30 years after that. So I would have, what does Luther say in the sacristy prayer? I would have ruined it a long time ago if it was up to me. It's certainly up to God, but I had help along the way. I still have a core group of brothers that we check in with each other. How you doing? And we don't allow each other to say, "Oh, I'm fine." You're never allowed to answer the question, "Fine, I'm just fine. Everything's fine. It's all fine." No. How you doing? And we have that permission to be that way with each other. So you were for years at the seminary as the guy in charge of forming new pastors. What was the unique challenge you found in America during that time that you were a president of the seminary? That getting people in the mission of the church. What's the unique challenge America faces as you were the leader of one of the premier seminaries in America?
about Premier, I didn't realize it when I was a student and a pastor, and I don't know how it was for you, but Concordia Seminary in St. Louis, and we can say the same about Concordia Fort Wayne. These are leading seminaries in the world of the of North American theological education. The ATS, the Association of Theological Schools, has about 270 seminaries. Average enrollment, at least of some years ago, was about 110. Both of our seminaries are way above that. So we're not in the highest tier when it comes to enrollment, but we are in the next tier of enrollment. We are both seminaries again are venerable because we have a long history.
Yes.
We both serve a single denomination. Now graduate programs, PhDs and so on, anybody can come, and the teaching is Lutheran. But when it comes to the quote unquote undergraduate education producing pastors and deaconesses, that is specifically honed for the LCMS, and that means we know our market. We know our market. And then financially, seminaries are an endangered species, but both of our seminaries are in good financial condition, and that's due to the people of the Missouri Synod who instinctively know that the life of the church is connected to these two schools. Uh, to the question, I think the biggest challenge, and I don't know if challenge is the right word, was to prepare pastors for the 21st century. You know, we grew up in 20th century Christian America, where the message of the church, the morals of the church were complemented by public life. So I went to St. Paul's Lutheran School, about 180 kids down there in the Heights, and then went to Big Bloom Township High School. Over 3,000, almost 4,000 students. But except for being taught evolution, which we were always privileged to push back on us Lutheran kids, it was fairly compatible. You know, it's fairly compatible. That America is gone. And what's interesting to me is that a lot of our Missouri Synod faithful churchgoers, being older, don't realize we're in a different time. Maybe I should back that up. A lot of older LCMS people know it's a different time and they grieve what has been lost. The church isn't the way it used to be years ago. America isn't what it used to be years ago. And so they grieve that. I think the challenge for the graduates of our seminaries is, of course, to be faithful. That's a granted, we have to work at it all the time, but to be faithful. But I think the challenge is to lead our worshiping congregations to understand what it's like in the 21st century, to explain what's going on, to show how the Word of God responds to the various challenges we have. So it's kind of like an exodus from wonderful Christian America to a time when the church is not favored, does not have special status anymore, and can be discriminated against, if that makes any sense.
It does. It's one of the things that I remembered that my associate is a recent graduate from Concordia Seminary. I'm 30 years graduate, but one of the things he learned from you to preach was to, like Luther, hold a Bible in one hand, but to have a newspaper in the other. Now, that obviously has changed. Now, maybe it's, to have a Bible in one hand and a tablet in the other.
I teach Bible class, and I get three papers every day: the local St. Louis Post-Dispatch, the Wall Street Journal, and the New York Times. And it costs me a few bucks, but it's information. It's
Yep.
exactly what you said, both hands. And so I asked my Bible class on Sunday. I said, "Well, did any of you read any one of these papers this morning?" No.
No.
We just read the Troy Times. Two people read the Troy Times. That's it. Which so and the tablet then doesn't give you the in-depth information, opinion reporting that a newspaper does. But this is the world we're in now.
Yeah. Yeah. Social media, as horrendous as it can be, I'm up on social media. I am on 3 different platforms where I will post videos and comments and things like that, but 4 different platforms. It's not that I go to it very deliberately not to be influenced by it, but I want to know the language, that this is what the world is speaking. This is what the world is thinking. That's their context, as I've been putting it recently. And we need to speak the timeless gospel of Jesus Christ in a context of where these people are right now. And Jesus can do amazing things. He always could do amazing things. And if we just let him, instead of, like you said earlier, dumbing down the message, we can just give them the message in a language they can understand, but it is the message.
What strikes me is I wish I were younger and starting out maybe with what I know now, because all the chaos in our society, all these ideologies that people are following, they're just looking for something to hang their life on.
Yes.
And the institutional church, they say, no, it's not that, because we got all kinds of foibles, and everybody knows about that. But what you said, it's Jesus. One of the ways my preaching has changed is less talking about the life of the church, less talking about the blessings of faith. And I'm saying, here's Jesus. Look at this guy. And so it's just a wonderful time. And it grieves me that I've only got a few years left, or I hope a few decades left. But you're right. I mean, this is a wonderful, this was always my saying at the seminary. It's a wonderful time to be the church.
Yes.
So stop belly aching about it, whoever you are.
Right.
Not Pastor Ed. Stop belly aching. It's a great time. The opportunities, like Jesus says, the fields are white unto harvest. There.
Yeah, it's amazing how we can either commiserate. It's not the way it used to be. It's like nothing ever is. Once you get back to that point, then you can start to enjoy, but Jesus is here. He's called us out of the boat. And if we just keep our eyes on him, we'll walk on that water. But you're right, it's an amazing time to be living and to be at this point in history, to be able to bring this timeless gospel. It's just amazing. Let me switch gears just a little bit to, if you can remember these things, because it's a little play on your retirement. But who guided you as a mentor? Maybe there's a group of people that through the years that they helped you along in each process of God's calling to you. Who was your mentors?
I guess I was such a challenge that I had to have a bunch of them. So like, the pastor when I was a kid was Reverend Arthur Brower, and he was a old time conservative, kind of a hair pastor guy, but I admired him. He preached without notes, and that sunk into my head right away. My great uncle was a pastor, and we called it Cooper's Grove. Now it's Country Club Hills in the south suburbs. And what I learned from him is you call on your people. Call on your people. It's a little harder today to make calls on people because for various reasons. But being related to people, Uncle Henry taught me that. Uncle Herman Bauer was a pastor of First Emmanuel down in Chicago. And he went into the military as a chaplain during World War II. And that impressed me. Chicago Heights, Ozzie Landbauer. He was very influential. That's when I'm in the seminary. And he would have me back whenever I would leave school to preach. He gave me all kinds of preaching opportunities. And then the great Dr. Hoffman, who just had a way to. He came across just like a normal blue collar kind of guy,
Hmm.
but with a seminary education. Said this guy knows what he's talking about.
That's right.
You might not realize it, but this guy knows what he's talking about. So there were a bunch of them, and I have to go to my parents. My dad, who's a blue collar guy, taught me how to work. My mom showed unconditional love. So I would say I was such a challenging case that they had a whole committee appointed.
So, what are you doing these days now that you're retired from being a professor and a president?
Well, work wise, there's maybe two aspects to the question. One is I have found retirement very difficult, but work wise, I'm working on the Concordia commentary on First Peter, and I'm enjoying that. I've written a series of articles for Concordia Pulpit Resources. I have a couple more. I just had an article appear in Lutheran Mission Matters, um, and I've resurrected my little daily 300 word thing called the Meyer Minute. Um, so, and once in a while, speaking engagement. I'm not up to traveling the way I used to. It used to be every weekend just about for 30 years. So that's what I'm doing. But the flip side of this is it's been hard. I would wake up at the seminary at milkman hours, 4 o'clock, look at my emails. Well, you screwed this up. You need to do this. We're way behind schedule on that. I need it today. Okay, da 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 da. You know. Now I'm glad to get junk mail. I don't get. Nobody needs me. Nobody, nobody needs me in the way they used to. So that daily engagement, including daily engagement with your work friends. Oh, this is really been hard. But like my other jobs, I think I'm getting my feet on the ground. The one thing I would say, no, that's hypocritical because I say a lot of things. But the church, and I include myself, we're not preparing our middle-aged people for retirement spiritually. Um, the algorithms take me to all kinds of retirement advice. None of it is spiritual. Okay. And what I pick up just casually from retired people is, well, be active, keep moving. And I understand that because the bones
Yeah.
stiffen up really quick. So I keep moving, but be active. And I'd venture to say that a lot of your volunteers at church are retired people.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. That's great. And I hope to be active for 20, 30 more years. Well, 30 is probably going to be a stretch. I mean, one might be a stretch, Lord only knows. But the thing is, that's a dodge. You're going to die. And whether it's a year or 20 years, decline, disability will set in. And if it doesn't, you're still going to die. Billy Graham said, and I appreciated this because he said what I was experiencing. The church teaches us how to die, but it doesn't teach us how to live in those years from the last paycheck until we die. And nowadays, since we live a lot longer, thanks to medicine, people don't know spiritually how to take that. And I'm indicting myself, Ed, okay?
Mhm.
Because I liked old people. I could hang out with them. But the idea of how do you understand this time spiritually, I was clueless about that. I didn't help them out.
Good point. I'm going to take that to heart because you're right. We've got that dying thing down because when we die, we get to go to heaven. But I just heard that. In fact, I just heard that this morning from another preacher online. That's like, but there's time in between then and now. And what are you going to do now? What are you going to do now? And I keep coming back to that phrase from the book of Esther, that Mordecai told Esther, for such a time as this, you're here. You're not here to go to heaven someday. You're here to bring heaven to somebody. Anyway,
Well,
old preacher here.
no, that's wise, and just saying that is helpful to people. Where I've settled on this is just me. This is not an official statement of the Lutheran Church, Missouri. So da, da, da. Where I've settled on this is the Sabbath. So we know that observant Jews take the Sabbath day off and they work 6 or whatever other days. Okay. Friday is the day of preparation. In the Bible, you see this in the New Testament. Friday before Jesus, Friday on which Jesus was crucified is called the day of preparation. Well, that's when observant Jews were very active. They got things together for the Sabbath because you can't do any work on the Sabbath. The meals were all, I don't know, prepared or however they do it. Friday was a very active day, and then sundown came, Sabbath begins. Well, here's how I'm understanding my own retirement spiritually. It's my day of preparation, and the eternal Sabbath is coming. Hebrews chapter 3. So, am I busy? Am I active? Yes, I hope to be so. But my orientation is changed to the Sabbath that is going to come, Lord only knows when. And that's what one of the things that irritates me is we always look back to what Jesus did. It's fine, dang, but the church doesn't look forward. And at least for me in retirement, the reality is most of my life is over, looking forward to the eternal Sabbath. But today's the day of preparation. So that's just how I've dealt with it.
I think it's interesting when you start sort of get into the minutia of church life. Um, Everything seems to be moving up to Easter. We're all getting ready for Easter, especially as preachers, as pastors. We're going to get to Easter. And this year, Pastor Ryan, my associate, your former student, and he is. I kind of put him in charge of the message series after Easter. And he's going to toy. He's toying with the idea of either using the Book of Acts or the Book of Revelation, and that's exactly. And it's like, oh yes, that's exactly what I would have done, because Acts, the Book of Acts, is what did the church do now that Jesus has lived, died, and rose again. They're looking ahead now. This is the result of all of that, and we're not going to look back. Of course we're going to celebrate the life of Jesus every Sunday would be an Easter, but we're looking ahead. The Book of Acts, and that's why the readings after Easter are so important. We're looking ahead to what did the church do with the gospel, with this wonderful message, and yet we're preparing. We're preparing for that day when Jesus will come back.
And that's an important thing that you just said, because we talk about the resurrection a lot, but the fact that he's at the right hand of God now, ruling over all things and going to appear suddenly, um, I think we underplay that. And again, I underplayed it in my own ministry.
So, what's your sort of motto for life? I often ask the question: is if I can give you a billboard out on the freeway, and so millions of people are going to pass by it every day. Would you put up on that billboard that I've got just this brief time with them? I want to give them a message. What is that you want to put up there?
Well, for me in retirement, it's tomorrow needs you, which may not do anything for a tourist on the highway, but like I said, what's my purpose in retirement? I don't have any institutional connection like I used to, and I came across this tomorrow needs you. Um, I'm tying up the loose ends of my life, and uh, a lot of that is done, tying up the loose ends, and the things I write, the things I teach, preach, and certainly this podcast here, which is going to be in the National Hall of Fame. It's for tomorrow. It's for tomorrow when I'm long gone. So again, I don't know if that's much of a billboard, but nowadays they have electronic billboards and they can take
Sure.
me down and put something else up.
We'll put your picture up there with her too. So, just a kind of, I don't know, more lighthearted. What are you reading these days? What's on your? Well, I used to ask what's on your nightstand. It's what's on your Kindle, what's on your tablet. But what are you reading these days?
Oh, a lot of it relates to the first century Roman Empire
Okay.
and what life was like then, because we read the New Testament through American eyes, and that's so deceptive. It was a world different. Um, I did in anticipation think of some of the most significant books, and I came up with four. And this may change next week. Okay, we get that.
No problem.
But one is Abraham Heschel's book, The Sabbath. And Heschel is a Hasidic Jewish philosopher, theologian. I think he died in 1977, so he's not a Christian. But his book on the Sabbath is very insightful about time. And as Lutherans, we can Martinize him very easily. A second one is columnist George Will's book, The Conservative Sensibility. Will is very conservative. He's very knowledgeable about American politics. The interesting thing is, he grew up way downstate in Champaign. His dad was a professor there, and he's the grandson of a Lutheran pastor, I think in Pennsylvania. He describes himself as an amiable atheist, but I have found reading him good. Uh, a, a third one, Neil Postman, Amusing Ourselves to Death. He was I don't know, he may still be alive. He's a Canadian, but Amusing Ourselves to Death talks about how the media shapes how we think and receive the messages. The medium is the message, okay, kind of thing. And the last one is the Devotions by Oswald Chambers, My Utmost for His Highest. I'll read those things. They go back to the early 1900s, and I think, man, I'm convicted. I'm convicted. I'm not this sanctified person you're describing. So those are, in anticipation of the book question, those are four of them. But what I'm reading now, mostly, well, two things. Peter, books about the Roman Empire and how Peter fits in. But secondly, I'm paying attention, whether it be in the newspaper or there's a new book out now by Chris Hayes about how we Americans don't pay attention anymore
Mm.
because our devices, we're constantly looking and we're not serious anymore. We're continually scrolling. We get a ding and we go off to that, and that's a huge ministry challenge, I think. So
Yes.
that's probably more than you wanted, but
That's
I'm
all right.
retired. I don't have anything else to do.
I get it though. I'm just as guilty of that with the devices as we commiserate with other people. I love my devices, and I keep. It's interesting how we've set it up here. Is that my organist will text me if I'm going to only do this hymn or this these stanzas of this hymn, so my watch will go off while I'm preaching. And I got to be careful with that. That I find myself with the temptation of getting distracted. But I'm glad that you put the Oswald Chambers book in there. It's a classic in Christian literature, but it's just every generation needs to discover him. It's just a matter of slowing down and just spend some time. And I'm glad we talked about Sabbath rest as well, because that's exactly what it's for. Slow
Mhm.
down and spend time with God. Just be still and know that He is God. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Dale. I really appreciate the time we've had together
My
today.
pleasure. My pleasure. I enjoyed it. The only thing I have to tell you is that this retired guy watches Bonanza at this hour every day. Reruns of Bonanza from when I was a kid. And I sacrifice laying on the couch watching Bonanza for this, but I enjoyed it, Ed.
That's high praise indeed, my friend. Thank you so much. God's blessings to you, and look forward to seeing you the next time.
To you too. Blessings to you, Ed. Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Dale Meyer on this episode of the Reflection Podcast. I hope that you are liking the podcast. I mean, yeah, you enjoy it, but you're literally liking it or rating it with 5 stars wherever you get your podcast. We are found on many of the major podcast apps, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and you can also watch the podcast. We do it as a video feed, and it's on our YouTube channel. So take on the St. Matthew YouTube channel, so you can take a look at that. There are links in the stream's description of the show's description here. This episode's got a link to all the books as well that Dale talked about in this episode of the podcast. I am one of the pastors at St. Matthew Lutheran, along with Pastor Ryan Ferguson. I am so happy to be able to work alongside him as we serve not only the people of St. Matthew and Hawthorne Woods, but through this medium, social media and online, people around the world. And if you'd like to know more about St. Matthew and how we reach the entire world, you can go to our website. It is www.stmats.net. And there are links to a lot of the different things that we do. We do have another podcast from the messages that are given at St. Matthew on the weekends and on special occasions and special services called Boundless. There are links there. You can subscribe to that one as well. You can see previous episodes of the podcast. We are in our 4th season. There are over 30 episodes already ready for you if you've not watched them. We've had wonderful guests like Greg Seltz and Matt Popovitz and Chad Bird and all kinds of wonderful people that reflect God's light and His love. The reason we do this is that we want to inspire you to answer God's call in your life. He loves you very much through Jesus Christ, and He wants you to reflect His light and His love in this dark world. So subscribe if you've not already done so, and check out the previous episodes. And stay tuned next time. I'm going to have another exciting guest, and I hope what will be a very insightful and inspiring message on this, the Reflection Podcast. God's richest blessings to you.